Welcome to Science Summaries, where we explore fascinating new research from around the world. In today's episode, we'll be diving into an intriguing area of anthropological and sociological research, the study of unusual cultural traditions and customs from different societies across the globe. As humans, we're naturally curious about how other people live, and learning about diverse cultural practices can expand our worldview and challenge our assumptions about what's normal or universal. Over the next 45 minutes or so, we'll be exploring several themes related to unique cultural traditions, including rituals and ceremonies for major life events like birth, coming of age, marriage, and death. Surprising customs related to food, dining, and social etiquette. Unusual beliefs and superstitions that shape behavior. Strange sports and competitions that have developed in certain regions. Unexpected social norms around things like personal space, time, and communication. The field of cross-cultural research is vast and ever-evolving. While anthropologists have been studying diverse human societies for well over a century, new insights are constantly emerging as researchers employ novel methods, explore understudied populations, and reconsider long-standing assumptions. By examining customs that may seem bizarre or irrational at first glance, we can gain a deeper understanding of the incredible diversity of human experience and the complex interplay between culture, environment, history, and human cognition. At the same time, we may discover surprising commonalities across cultures, shedding light on universal aspects of human nature. It's important to note that the goal here is not to gawk at or judge other cultures, but rather to approach these practices with genuine curiosity, empathy, and respect. What seems strange to us may be perfectly logical within a particular cultural context. And of course, many of our own cultural practices would likely seem just as odd to an outside observer. As we discuss various cultural traditions, we'll explore questions like: what purpose do these customs serve within their societies? How did they originate and evolve over time? What can they tell us about human psychology and social dynamics? How are traditional practices being impacted by globalization and modernization? We'll draw on research from anthropology, sociology, psychology, and related fields to paint a rich picture of human cultural diversity. While we can't possibly cover every unique tradition from around the world in one video, we'll highlight a range of compelling examples that illustrate broader themes and patterns. Whether you're a student, researcher, or simply someone fascinated by human culture, I hope this overview will pique your curiosity and inspire you to learn more. Understanding diverse cultural perspectives is more important than ever in our increasingly interconnected world. So without further ado, let's begin our whirlwind tour of some of the most unusual and intriguing cultural traditions that researchers have documented around the globe. We'll start by looking at some fascinating rituals and ceremonies related to major life transitions. Part 1. Rituals and ceremonies for life transitions. One of the most fruitful areas of research into cultural traditions has been the study of rituals and ceremonies surrounding major life events like birth, coming of age, marriage, and death. These transitional moments tend to be imbued with deep cultural significance across societies. Let's look at some of the more unusual practices that have been documented by researchers. Birth rituals. When a new life enters the world, many cultures have developed elaborate customs to welcome the baby and ensure its health and good fortune. While practices like baby showers or baptisms may be familiar to Western audiences, anthropologists have uncovered some truly unexpected birth rituals in various parts of the world. In the town of Solapur in Maharashtra, India, researchers have documented a tradition in which newborns are ceremonially dropped from the roof of the Baba Umar Dargah shrine onto a sheet held by men below. This ritual, known as baby dropping, has been practiced for nearly 700 years and is believed to bring good luck and health to the infant. While this may sound alarming, it's taken very seriously by participants, though it has faced criticism in recent years over safety concerns. In Finland, some rural communities maintain a tradition of briefly submerging newborns in icy water. This custom, known as avantojuanti, for babies, is believed to strengthen the infant's immune system and fortitude. Remarkably, Studies have found no negative health impacts from this practice when done properly under controlled conditions. In the Igbo tribe of Nigeria, researchers have observed birth rituals that involve burying the placenta in specific locations chosen based on the desired traits for the child. The placenta might be buried near a school to promote intelligence, or under a strong tree to impart strength. This reflects the Igbo belief in the spiritual power of the placenta and its ongoing connection to the child. These examples illustrate how birth rituals often blend practical concerns about health and safety with spiritual beliefs and cultural values. They provide a fascinating window into how different societies conceptualize the beginning of life and seek to set newborns on the right path. Coming-of-age ceremonies. As children transition into adulthood, many cultures mark this milestone with ceremonies or trials designed to test and showcase the adolescent's readiness to take on adult responsibilities. Some of these coming-of-age rituals push the boundaries of what most Westerners would consider safe or appropriate. Among the Satere-Ma'i people of the Brazilian Amazon, young men must undergo an excruciating initiation ritual involving hundreds of stings from bullet ants, insects with an extremely painful venom. The boys must endure this ordeal stoically to prove their manhood. Interestingly, researchers have found that this ritual may have unexpected health benefits, as repeated exposure appears to build up immunity to the venom. In parts of Vanuatu and Papua New Guinea, coming-of-age ceremonies for boys have traditionally involved various forms of bloodletting and scarification. The Kaningara tribe of Papua New Guinea, for instance, practices an intense ritual called crocodile scarification, where deep cuts are made on the young men's bodies to resemble crocodile scales. These physically and emotionally intense rituals are seen as necessary for transforming boys into men and connecting them to ancestral spirits. For girls in the Okrika community of Nigeria, entering womanhood is marked by an elaborate ceremony called Iria, which involves intricate beadwork, body painting, and dancing celebrations that can last for days. In contrast to male initiation rites that often focus on tests of endurance, these female ceremonies tend to emphasize fertility, beauty, and social bonds. A particularly unusual coming-of-age tradition has been documented among the Tikuna people of the Colombian Amazon, where adolescents of both genders engage in a ceremonial exchange of teeth with their age mates. This practice is believed to forge lifelong social connections. While the original ritual involved actually removing and swapping teeth, it has evolved in recent years to use symbolic representations instead. What these diverse examples show is that coming-of-age rituals, while varying widely in form, often share common themes of transformation, social recognition, and instilling cultural values in the younger generation. They reflect each society's particular views on what constitutes adulthood and how best to prepare youth for their adult roles. Wedding customs. Moving on to marriage customs, researchers have documented an incredible diversity of traditions surrounding this universal human institution. While white dresses and diamond rings may be standard in Western weddings, other cultures have developed some truly unique matrimonial practices. In Kyrgyzstan, there's a long-standing tradition of bride kidnapping, known as alakachu, in which the groom and his friends stage a mock abduction of the bride. While this was once a real means of procuring wives, it has evolved into a consensual, playful ritual in modern times for many couples. Nevertheless, it reflects deep-rooted cultural attitudes about gender roles and marriage in Kyrgyz society. Contrast this with the groom kidnapping tradition of the Iban people in Borneo, where it is the bride's family who captures the groom and subjects him to a series of challenges and negotiations before he can claim his bride. This custom emphasizes the value placed on the bride and ensures the groom is truly committed. Some of the strangest wedding traditions involve props or actions believed to bring good fortune to the couple. In parts of Scotland, for instance, friends of the bride and groom will cover them in sticky substances like treacle or flour before the wedding in a custom known as blackening the bride. This messy ritual is thought to ward off evil spirits. In certain regions of India, some communities maintain a tradition where the bride is required to cry at specific points during multi-day wedding celebrations. This custom, known as rula, in Punjabi weddings, is seen as a way for the bride to express gratitude to her parents and cleanse herself emotionally before entering her new life. A particularly eyebrow-raising wedding custom comes from Sweden, where it's considered good luck for wedding guests to try to steal the bride's or groom's shoes during the reception. This tradition, known as mouse eating, requires the newlyweds to keep their feet off the ground to prevent theft, leading to some amusing situations as the celebration progresses. These examples demonstrate how wedding traditions often blend elements of play and ritual, practical concerns and superstition. They reflect each culture's particular views on love, family, gender roles, and social bonds. Studying these customs provides valuable insights into how different societies conceptualize and formalize romantic partnerships. Funeral rites. How a culture treats its dead can reveal a great deal about its beliefs, values, and worldview. Researchers have documented a wide array of fascinating funerary practices around the world. In Tanah Toraja, Indonesia, some communities practice a unique form of living burial for the elderly. When an older person feels their time is near, they may choose to enter a special cave called urang, where they will remain until death, attended by family members. This practice is seen as a way to ease the transition between life and death and maintain a connection with ancestors. Contrast this with the sky burials, practiced in Tibet and some parts of Mongolia. In this tradition, the deceased are ritually dismembered and left exposed on mountaintops to be consumed by vultures. Far from being seen as disrespectful, this practice is viewed as a final act of generosity, returning one's body to nature, and is deeply rooted in Buddhist beliefs about the impermanence of the physical form. In the Philippines, particularly among the Benguet people of northern Luzon, researchers have observed the tradition of hanging coffins. Instead of burying their dead, the Benguet secure coffins to the sides of cliffs. This practice is believed to bring the deceased closer to their ancestral spirits and protect them from floods and animals. A particularly striking funerary custom comes from Madagascar, where some ethnic groups, particularly the Malagasy people, practice a tradition called Famadihana, or turning of the bones. Every 5 to 7 years, families exhume the bodies of their ancestors, rewrap them in fresh cloth, and dance with the corpses before returning them to the tomb. This ceremony is seen as a way to honor ancestors and maintain connections between the living and the dead. In Sulawesi, Indonesia, the Toraja people are known for keeping mummified remains of their ancestors in their homes, bringing them out for special occasions and even symbolically feeding them. This practice, part of a complex set of funerary customs that can last for years after a person's death, reflects a belief that the dead continue to play an active role in family life. What these diverse examples illustrate is that attitudes towards death and the afterlife vary tremendously across cultures. Funerary practices can serve multiple purposes, from practical concerns about hygiene to spiritual beliefs about the soul's journey to expressions of grief and remembrance. By studying these customs, researchers gain valuable insights into how different societies cope with mortality and maintain social cohesion in the face of loss. Part 2. Food-related customs and dining etiquette. Now let's shift our focus to some of the more unusual food-related customs and rules of dining etiquette that researchers have documented around the world. Food is a universal human need, but the specific ways we prepare, consume, and share meals vary dramatically across cultures. These practices often reflect deep-rooted values, beliefs, and social norms. Unusual eating implements. While many cultures use some variation of utensils, plates, and cups, researchers have discovered some truly unique eating implements and techniques in various parts of the world. In Ethiopia, for instance, it's traditional to eat with the hands, but only using the right hand. The left hand is considered unclean and using it to handle food is taboo. This custom has interesting implications for left-handed individuals and reflects broader cultural attitudes about purity and pollution in Ethiopian society. Contrast this with the chopstick using cultures of East Asia, where intricate rules govern proper chopstick etiquette. In Japan, for example, passing food directly from one person's chopsticks to another's is strictly forbidden, as it resembles a funeral ritual involving bones of the deceased. This custom, known as Tsukiyatama, highlights the deep connection between food practices and spiritual beliefs in Japanese culture. A particularly unusual eating implement comes from the Yanomami people of the Amazon rainforest, who use the jawbone of a specific fish species, the piranha, as a utensil for consuming certain ritual meals. This practice is imbued with spiritual significance and is believed to impart the fish's qualities to the eater. In parts of Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, researchers have observed a tradition of drinking fermented mare's milk, known as kumis, from bowls made from the skullcaps of honored ancestors. This custom combines unusual eating implements with ancestor veneration in a unique way, reflecting the importance of horses in Central Asian nomadic cultures. These examples demonstrate how eating utensils and techniques can be far more than just practical tools. They often carry deep cultural meanings and reinforce social bonds and hierarchies. Strange food taboos. Every culture has certain food taboos or dietary restrictions, but some are particularly surprising to outsiders. These prohibitions often have complex origins involving religious beliefs, historical circumstances, or practical concerns that may no longer be relevant. In Samoa, for instance, touching food with one's chin is considered extremely offensive and can lead to social ostracism. The origins of this taboo are unclear, but it's rigidly observed nonetheless, highlighting how seemingly arbitrary food rules can become deeply ingrained in a culture. Some Native American groups, such as certain clans among the Navajo, maintain strict taboos against consuming certain animals that played important roles in their creation myths. For example, some Navajo clans are prohibited from eating fish or certain birds. Breaking these taboos is believed to invite disaster for the individual and the community. A particularly intriguing food taboo comes from the Orang Asli people of Malaysia, where in some communities, pregnant women are prohibited from eating certain types of river fish. This restriction is based on a belief that it will cause the baby to be born with a fish-like appearance. While this may seem irrational, researchers suggest it may have originated as a way to protect pregnant women from mercury contamination in certain fish species. In parts of China and other East Asian countries, some cultures have taboos against eating certain foods in combination, based on traditional medicine concepts about hot and cold energies. For example, crabs, considered cold, shouldn't be eaten with persimmons, considered hot. Violating these rules is thought to cause illness or imbalance in the body. These food taboos illustrate how dietary practices can be shaped by complex cultural beliefs and traditions, often persisting even when their original purpose is no longer clear or relevant. Unusual dining customs. Beyond specific foods or utensils, many cultures have developed unique customs and rituals around the act of dining itself. These practices often reflect important social values and reinforce community bonds. In the United Arab Emirates and some other Middle Eastern countries, it's considered polite to leave a small amount of food on your plate at the end of a meal. Finishing everything is seen as implying that you weren't given enough to eat. This contrasts sharply with cultures where cleaning one's plate is expected. A fascinating dining custom comes from Sweden, where it's traditional to remain completely silent during the main course of a meal, a practice known as tystnadsplikt. Conversation only resumes once everyone has finished eating. This practice is believed to promote mindful eating and appreciation of the food. In Japan, slurping noodles loudly is not only acceptable but encouraged as a way to show enjoyment of the meal and compliment the chef. This noodle slurping custom contrasts sharply with Western norms around quiet eating and demonstrates how what's considered polite in one culture may be seen as rude in another. Some indigenous Amazonian groups, such as the Achua people of Ecuador, maintain a tradition of ritual fasting before important hunts or ceremonies. During these periods, not only is food restricted, but participants must also avoid even thinking about or naming certain foods, highlighting the spiritual significance attributed to dietary practices. A particularly unusual dining custom comes from Malawi, where in some communities, it's traditional for young men to engage in chisudzo, a practice of stealing food from their neighbors' cooking pots as a way of proving their bravery and cunning. While this might seem antisocial, it's an accepted practice within certain bounds and serves as a form of social bonding and skills training for young men. These diverse examples show how the seemingly simple act of eating can be imbued with complex social meanings and expectations. Dining customs often serve to reinforce cultural values, social hierarchies, and community bonds. Part 5. Unexpected social norms and communication styles. Every culture has its own set of unwritten rules governing social interactions. While some norms, like respecting elders, are fairly common across cultures, others can be quite surprising to outsiders. Let's examine some of the more unusual social norms and communication styles that researchers have documented around the world. Personal space and physical contact. The concept of personal space varies widely across cultures, leading to some interesting customs and potential misunderstandings in cross-cultural interactions. In many Middle Eastern and North African countries, such as Egypt and Saudi Arabia, same-sex friends often hold hands or walk arm in arm as a sign of friendship. This level of physical contact between men is normal and non-romantic, contrasting sharply with norms in many Western countries where such behavior might be interpreted differently. In Japan, the concept of personal space, or ma, extends beyond physical distance to include conversational pauses and even the arrangement of objects in a room. This appreciation for negative space influences everything from communication styles to architecture and can be jarring for those from cultures that prioritize filling silences or spaces. The Maori people of New Zealand greet each other with a hongi, a pressing of noses and foreheads that symbolizes the sharing of breath and life force. This intimate greeting can be surprising for outsiders but is a deeply meaningful cultural practice. Time perception and punctuality. Attitudes towards time and punctuality can vary dramatically between cultures, leading to some interesting customs and potential conflicts in international business settings. In many Latin American countries, like Brazil and Argentina, there's a much more relaxed attitude towards time known as hora latina, or Latin time. Arriving 30 minutes to an hour late for a social engagement is often considered normal and not disrespectful. Contrast this with Germany, where punctuality is highly valued. Being even a few minutes late can be seen as rude and disorganized. This extends to public transportation, where trains and buses are expected to run exactly on schedule. In some parts of rural Mali, the Dogon people traditionally don't use precise numerical time measurements. Instead, they might arrange to meet when the shadow of a certain tree reaches a specific point. This highlights how perceptions of time can be tied to natural rhythms rather than clock time. Communication styles. The ways in which people communicate, both verbally and non-verbally, can vary significantly between cultures, sometimes leading to misunderstandings. In some East Asian cultures, like China and Japan, indirect communication is often preferred to maintain harmony and avoid conflict. Saying no directly is often considered rude, so people might use phrases like, "It might be difficult," or "I'll think about it," to express disagreement or refusal. The Piraha people of the Amazon have a language that lacks words for specific numbers beyond 1, 2, and many. This has led to fascinating research on how language shapes cognition and perception of quantity. In Thailand, the height at which you hold your hands when wai-ing, a greeting gesture similar to pressing palms together in prayer, communicates the level of respect you're showing. The higher the hands, the more respect is conveyed. This complex system of nonverbal communication can be challenging for outsiders to navigate. The Finnish have a concept called sisu, which roughly translates to a combination of resilience, determination, and stoicism. This cultural value is reflected in communication styles that often involve long silences and minimal small talk, which can be interpreted as coldness by those from more verbose cultures. These examples highlight how deeply ingrained cultural norms can influence every aspect of social interaction, from physical proximity to concepts of time and methods of expression. Part 6. Traditional practices in a globalized world. As our world becomes increasingly interconnected, many traditional cultural practices are evolving, adapting, or sometimes disappearing altogether. This process of cultural change in response to globalization is a rich area of ongoing research for anthropologists and sociologists. Preservation versus adaptation. Many indigenous communities around the world are working to preserve their traditional practices in the face of modernization and outside influences. The Sami people of northern Scandinavia, for instance, continue to practice traditional reindeer herding, but now often use snowmobiles instead of skis. This blend of traditional livelihoods with modern technology represents a common form of cultural adaptation. In Bhutan, the government has implemented a policy of gross national happiness that aims to balance modernization with the preservation of traditional Buddhist culture. This includes mandates on traditional dress in certain settings and limits on tourism to prevent cultural erosion. Revival of traditional practices. In some cases, traditions that had begun to fade are being intentionally revived as a way of reclaiming cultural identity. In New Zealand, there's been a significant revival of the Maori language, Te Reo Maori, in recent decades. Once at risk of dying out, it's now taught in schools and used in official government communications alongside English. The native Hawaiian cultural renaissance that began in the 1970s has led to a resurgence of traditional practices like hula, outrigger canoeing, and traditional navigation techniques. This movement has played a crucial role in strengthening Hawaiian cultural identity. Globalization of local traditions. Some local traditions have found unexpected popularity on the global stage, leading to interesting forms of cultural exchange and sometimes concerns about appropriation. Yoga, originally a spiritual practice from India, has become a global phenomenon. While this has increased awareness of Indian culture, it has also led to debates about cultural appropriation and the commercialization of spiritual practices. The Japanese concept of kawaii, cuteness, has spread globally, influencing fashion, product design, and even communication styles far beyond Japan's borders. This represents an interesting case of a culturally specific aesthetic becoming a global trend. Technological impact on traditions. The rise of digital technology is having profound effects on how cultural traditions are practiced and transmitted. Many indigenous communities are using digital platforms to document and share their traditions. For example, some Aboriginal Australian communities are creating digital archives of their Dreamtime stories, allowing for preservation and wider dissemination of these oral traditions. Social media platforms have enabled diaspora communities to maintain connections with their cultural heritage. For instance, young Somalis around the world use platforms like TikTok to share and celebrate aspects of Somali culture, from traditional dress to linguistic quirks. The advent of DNA testing kits has led to a surge of interest in genetic heritage, sometimes influencing how people identify culturally and which traditions they choose to adopt or revive. These examples illustrate the complex ways in which cultural traditions are negotiating the pressures and opportunities presented by globalization. While some practices are being lost, others are finding new forms of expression and reaching wider audiences than ever before. As we've seen throughout this exploration, human cultural diversity is vast and endlessly fascinating. From birth rituals to dining customs, from unique sports to communication styles, the range of human cultural expression is truly remarkable. By studying these diverse practices, we gain not only a deeper appreciation for human creativity and adaptability, but also valuable insights into the fundamental aspects of human nature that underlie our varied cultural expressions. Part 7. Ethical considerations in studying cultural traditions. As we examine and discuss unique cultural practices, it's crucial to consider the ethical implications of this kind of research and how it's presented to a wider audience. Respect for cultural autonomy. Anthropologists and other researchers must navigate complex ethical terrain when studying cultural practices, especially those of indigenous or minority groups. There's an ongoing debate about the extent to which outsiders should intervene in or even document practices they may view as harmful. For instance, the practice of female genital mutilation, FGM, in some African and Middle Eastern cultures has been a subject of intense controversy. While many international organizations condemn the practice as a violation of human rights, some argue that outside intervention represents a form of cultural imperialism. The Yanomami people of the Amazon have been the subject of numerous anthropological studies, some of which have been criticized for exploiting or misrepresenting the community. This has led to discussions about the need for more collaborative and ethically conscious research methodologies. Cultural appropriation versus appreciation. As knowledge of diverse cultural practices spreads globally, questions arise about the line between cultural appreciation and appropriation. The use of Native American headdresses as fashion accessories or Halloween costumes has been widely criticized as disrespectful appropriation of sacred cultural symbols. This has led to increased awareness about the need to understand the cultural significance of traditional practices and artifacts. On the other hand, the global popularity of practices like yoga or mindfulness meditation, while sometimes accused of being appropriative, has also led to increased interest in and respect for their cultures of origin. Balancing tradition and individual rights. In some cases, traditional cultural practices may conflict with contemporary notions of individual rights, leading to complex legal and ethical dilemmas. The practice of arranged marriage in some South Asian cultures has been a point of contention, with debates about how to balance respect for cultural traditions with protection of individual autonomy. Some indigenous groups argue for the right to continue traditional hunting practices that may conflict with endangered species protection laws, asserting that these practices are integral to their cultural identity and sustainable when properly managed. Representation and stereotyping. How cultural practices are presented and discussed can have significant impacts on how those cultures are perceived globally. The portrayal of African tribes as primitive or savage in early anthropological works has had lasting negative impacts. Modern researchers strive for more nuanced and respectful representations that acknowledge the complexity and validity of diverse cultural practices. There's an ongoing discussion about who has the right to represent and interpret cultural practices. Many argue that members of a culture should be the primary voices in describing and explaining their own traditions. These ethical considerations highlight the need for sensitivity, respect, and critical thinking when studying and discussing cultural practices. It's crucial to approach this topic with an awareness of historical power imbalances and a commitment to ethical, collaborative research methodologies. Part 8. Key takeaways and broader implications. As we conclude our exploration of unique cultural traditions around the world, let's reflect on some key insights and their broader implications for our understanding of human culture and society. The diversity of human experience. Our journey through various cultural practices underscores the incredible diversity of human experience. From birth rituals to funeral rites, from eating habits to sports, humans have developed a vast array of ways to navigate life's challenges and celebrations. This diversity reminds us that there's no single, right, way to be human. Practices that seem strange or even objectionable to us may be deeply meaningful within their cultural context. This realization can foster greater empathy and openness to different ways of life. Universal themes in cultural practices. Despite the diversity we've observed, certain themes appear consistently across cultures. Rituals marking major life transitions, beliefs about luck and fortune, and customs governing social interactions are found in some form in nearly all societies. These commonalities suggest that while the specific expressions may vary, humans share fundamental needs for meaning, social connection, and ways to understand and influence their world. This insight can help us appreciate our shared humanity across cultural divides. Adaptability of cultural traditions. Our examination of how traditions are evolving in a globalized world highlights the adaptability of human culture. While some practices fade away, others find new forms of expression or blend with outside influences to create something new. This adaptability suggests that culture is not static but a dynamic, ongoing process. It challenges us to think of tradition not as something frozen in time, but as a living, evolving aspect of human society. The role of environment in shaping culture. Many of the practices we've explored are closely tied to the specific environments in which they developed. From the sky burials of Tibet to the reindeer herding of the Sami, cultural practices often reflect adaptations to particular geographic and ecological conditions. This connection between culture and environment underscores the importance of considering ecological factors in understanding human societies. It also raises questions about how cultural practices might need to adapt in the face of global environmental changes. The complexity of cultural identity. Our discussion of how traditions are maintained, revived, or adapted in the modern world highlights the complex nature of cultural identity. Individuals and communities often navigate multiple cultural influences, choosing which traditions to maintain and how to adapt them to changing circumstances. This complexity challenges simplistic notions of cultural identity and reminds us that culture is not monolithic but multifaceted and often contested. The importance of cultural understanding in a global world. As our world becomes increasingly interconnected, understanding and respecting diverse cultural practices is more important than ever. From international business dealings to global policymaking, cultural competence is crucial for effective communication and collaboration. Moreover, exposure to diverse cultural perspectives can enrich our own lives, challenging our assumptions and broadening our understanding of what it means to be human. In conclusion, the study of unique cultural traditions offers us a window into the incredible diversity and creativity of human societies. It challenges us to think beyond our own cultural norms, fosters empathy and understanding, and provides valuable insights into the fundamental aspects of human nature that underlie our varied cultural expressions. As we navigate an increasingly globalized world, this understanding can help us build bridges across cultural divides and appreciate the rich tapestry of human experience.